of this settlement by Meta?
Well, hi, thanks for having me today. So I think what's important to note here is the importance of bipartisanship. And the one thing that Democrats have really stood for is corporate accountability and responsibility. And so there has to be some regulations in place, especially to protect our children. We do that with cars, we do that with medications. And so why wouldn't we do it with social media? And so I think here that this is a positive step towards that. There has been, and we have known this for years, very negative influencing on social media, whether it's through political or through bullying. And we need to make sure that it is regulated in some way. So I do think Congress should take a page out of this book here and decide to actually come to terms with a law to be passed in order to protect children.
Yeah, and Stephen, just to come back to you here and, calling it, you call it a shakeout. I guess it's important to point out, Meta could have fought this case. They fought other ones. They decided to settle and pay this money out, but they could have, kept going with this trial. We could have kept seeing Adam Mosseri testify. Mark Zuckerberg was scheduled to testify. In the end, they settled. They said, hey, we're kind of done here. What do you think that says maybe about the way the tide is turning for social media companies here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I would never say that it wasn't a losing battle. By and large, people do not like what social media has brought on society, the way that it has changed the way that we think, the way that we relate to one another, the way that we spend our time. There's a big issue in all markets and in America with sort of revealed preferences versus sincere preferences. We like using these platforms. We like swiping and getting the fun content, but then we'll also still tell pollsters that we don't like the way that it makes us feel at the end of the day. My concern remains that regulation did previously exist. It has already existed in the form of parental controls through these apps, through, in the iPhone in particular, parents' ability to manage children's accounts. You have always had authority in your own home as a parent supervising your child. But I really do believe here that what has happened is not going to substitute or provide parents with the will to guide their children through these platforms, to say no to certain downloads, to restrict their screen time with using their own authority. I think it's cool. I think it's great that there are going to be, new features that lock kids out
Well,
at
let me just bring.
nighttime, and they're not going to be getting notifications during school hours. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But we already had the power to do these things without a court and without legislators.
Well, just to bring in Samia here, because we've seen other countries go much farther than this. The UK, Turkey, Australia, all moving to basically ban social media for anyone under the age of 16. Would you like to see, Tamia, the U.S. do something similar? I mean, is that on the table here?
I think that the U.S. should really step in here and do something to enforce regulations. Young children are resilient, and we need to understand and know that at this point, we have to do something about it so children don't feel worse when they're online. My younger cousins have a lot of anxiety going online, and that's not how my generation grew up with it. So a lot has gone too far, and the United States, being the leader of the free world, we're behind here. So we do need to start implementing some regulations and safety measures that go a significant step further, so young people can adjust as they grow up.
Yeah, and I mean
it's feel better about themselves.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned your generation. I think there's we haven't really been focusing on the impact of non-teens. What about adults? I mean, adults seem to be on their phone just as much as kids. Let's leave that there for now, because I want to get into something else taking place here in Washington. The Trump administration says the future of the Kennedy Center could be in jeopardy if proposed renovations are not carried out. They're claiming that the structure could become increasingly hazardous and may have to be torn down. The president's lawyers argue that the National Arts venue must be shut down for 2 years to undergo a $250 million renovation, which would include reinstating President Donald Trump's name on the facade. Some Democrats in Congress are trying to block those proposals. Stephen, what do you make of this kind of messaging, I guess, from the Department of Justice here? This has been kind of a focal point of President Trump, and even saying, hey, you should put President Trump's name back on the Kennedy Center, even though a judge ruled that that would be something only Congress could do.
Well, I don't mean to be pithy here. I understand that this story is of huge interest to the world's theater kids, particularly Democrats in America. But what is going on here is the DOJ being full of bluster, trying to play rhetorical hardball. They're not going to knock this building down, and they also cannot put Donald Trump's name on it. The Kennedy Center is the result of a law that was passed in 1958 during the Eisenhower administration. And then after Kennedy's assassination, Congress maintained the ability to name that center. But they also gave the executive the ability to appoint the board members so that the Kennedy Center would be responsive to the democratic process known as our elections. And Donald Trump has appointed the board members. He holds a majority, and they have voted 3 times just this year to renovate the building, which would involve closing it down for a period of time. The board has voted, and a court, an activist judge who does not like the Trump administration, has Trump derangement syndrome, is trying to block that and gum up the works. Now, I want him to block the name change. That's illegal. But the board has voted on a renovation, so this silly season has to stop.
Tamia, your thoughts here? Is this just bluster, as Stephen says?
Yeah, can I be honest here? Like, I'm tired of talking about this. I feel like when I saw this come up again, I was like, you've got to be joking. There are so many more things important right now going on in this country, and we're going back and forth again about a name.
Well, let me ask you this then, Tamia. You know, clearly this is something that is important to the president, the White House. So why does it keep coming up?
He's the king of vanity projects. It keeps coming up. This is his board. So his board is going to do exactly what he wants them to do. Thus his DOJ, which could also be the Department of Justice could be doing other things other than worrying about a renovation that must happen and a rename that must happen. These are not things that must happen. And most Americans do not care about this. They care about being safe. They care about being able to eat lettuce. They care about being able to take care of their daily lives. And this vanity project between this and the ballroom is absurd. And the waste of taxpayer dollars, the way the Republicans have always said that Democrats overspend, this is a prime example of that. So I get exhausted and clearly very frustrated when we keep going back and forth on this, because at the end of the day, we all know that this is not what actually matters, and we need to move on.
We'll see if this is indeed the last we hear of this. A lot of topics, obviously, that voters do care about in those midterms coming up very soon. Tamia Booker and Stephen Kent, thank you to you both.